Right, I just want to pick what is on the front page of the Standard this morning before we go to our news and just cross over to our panelists today. MPs are running out of options in bid to stop Uhuru taxes, and it says they also face off with a special sitting of the National Assembly scheduled tomorrow to decide the fate of additional taxes on petroleum products and wide-ranging budget cuts. Divided MPs explain their positions ahead of the crucial vote. This story on page 4 and 5 of the Standard, as I mentioned, and also headline on the front page of the Standard is also this story: NASA MPs join Jubilee revolt, a House united in rebellion. I want also to introduce to you members of Parliament who are joining us right now. This is Jared Okello, who is a member of Parliament from. Remind me, he's sleeping. Nayndo, yes. It's been a while since he actually been on the show. Until that is sleeping. And Okong'o Omogeni is a member of Parliament from Nyamira. And also we do have with us Shem, who's a global leader of Kenya Diaspora Alliance as well. Just looking at these pages of the dailies today, I just want to hear your comment before we head over to our news bulletin this morning. So you're running out of options. Is that true?
As a member of Parliament, I think that heading is ill-advised.
Ill-advised?
Because members of Parliament cannot run out of options. The mandate that they are carrying out is a constitutional mandate. You remember, we have the powers to do budget and appropriation of the national revenue. That is the same body that is said to be lacking options. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we also do, which the President has done,
yes,
is that once there's a disconnect between the appropriations of finance bill and the expectations of the executive, it is taken back to us for review and amendment. So that is not a body that will run short of options. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And fundamentally, even when the executive cannot play alongside the interest of members of public together with members of Parliament, there is an option of impeachment. So that is not a body that runs out of option at all. So I think that headline does not capture what is meant to be the functions of the National Assembly. Mm-hmm. So we will never run out of options.
You'll never run out of options?
No way.
Okong'o Omogeni, you think it is ill-advised? You'll never run out of options?
I think what maybe the headline should have said is that the MPs are facing a test on their independence vis-a-vis the executive's control over Parliament. Mm-hmm. Because I think what the choice we are facing is a choice between members of Parliament who will choose to stand with the people, mm-hmm, and defy the executive, or they choose to be kind of an appendage of the executive and move along with the executive. I think that's what I'll say is the choice that is facing members of Parliament. I think everybody is looking at who will be counted, who will be on the side of the people, who will choose to smile with the executive. Mm-hmm. That's the choice that we are facing.
Who will choose to smile with the executive?
Yes.
And so this is aptly what we are really talking about, that MPs are divided. Yeah, so the ones who really want to have a political expediency with the president are the ones who really want to
In
have...
fact, this is the test we are facing. We want to see whether members of Parliament can be independent and if they can act in the best interest of the people of this country, not acting at the expedience of the executive. Mm-hmm. That is the choice we are facing. Because Debarl, if you live in this country, you know the cry. I've just come from my county in Nyamira.
Yes.
And you'll see, I was in 2 funerals, and there is one funeral where people actually made a call, a clarion call, and said, on Tuesday, mm-hmm, we don't want to see any member of Parliament in this county of Nyamira. We want to see you in Nairobi defending our interests. I mean, that was just the people back in Nyamira saying, we want to see you in Parliament, we want to see you take a vote, being on the side of the people and not on the side of the executive that wants to oppress common mwananchi. So that is the choice that they are facing. And I think This is a time when we want to take a roll call. We want to see, when we take the vote, who is on the side of the people, who is on the side of the executive.
All right.
Well, Debarl, this is quite critical. You know, we are carrying a burden that does not necessarily belong to this parliament. You understand the history where it began in 2013, and we have had successive postponements to this very day. So then the executive comes up with a proposal that had been thwarted by members of parliament. And what we are saying is, at the moment, based on all the economic indicators, let us push this forward, as has been done before, by 2 more years. And then the president comes up and says, it cannot be 0, it can be up to 8%. That is what the president has proposed. But we are saying that Kenyans are suffering, people do not have bread on their tables, we have to make life affordable to them. And for that reason, as my brother has properly said, Senator Omogeni,
yes.
Tuesday, which is tomorrow, is a D-Day, is a very critical day for this country. Any member of parliament who does not want to align himself or herself with the Kenyan people and would choose to go to bed with the executive, I think we have to all understand that election is at the corner. President Uhuru Kenyatta is doing his final term, so he doesn't have anything quite fundamental to tie him with the electorate, apart from, championing his Agenda 4. So Kenyans must realize that yes, elections will come, but the interest of the Kenyan people must reign supreme. Finally, the Article 1, Sub-Article 2 of the Constitution talks about sovereignty.
Yes.
That sovereignty is only exercised by duly elected people on behalf of the Kenyans. So Kenyans are out there watching how we are going to torpedo that most fundamental sovereignty. So we must play alongside Kenyans. Otherwise, we will face the wrath of the electorate, and no one is ready to do so.
All right. So let's just also rope in Jeremiah Kioni. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Welcome this morning. So we're actually on the horn of dilemma as far as the MPs are concerned here, and we're just looking at what is also on the front page of the Standard this morning, that they're running out of options, which they starkly deny that they're not really running out of options. But we want to see from your end, where are we headed as far as this is concerned? What will be the possible outcome tomorrow?
Thank you, Debarl, and I want good morning to all our viewers. I know we have gathered a lot from the media. I haven't seen the actual supplementary budget, and at times what we have in the media is different from what is eventually on the floor of the House, for the reason that until you have seen the document, you cannot say categorically what it contains. But also, reading from what is contained in the papers is that we are certainly getting back the finance bill with proposals from the president. And I have seen what the media has written as the proposals coming from the presidency. And it's not going to be easy. Certainly, I know there is a push on the members of parliament to do as my colleagues have said, and I've just gathered a bit of it. But I don't want to sound very far from where they are, but I don't see the members of parliament having the capacity to do away with what the president will have proposed. One, because you need the 2/3 to overturn the memorandum. But two, also, there is the reality that will hit us if we don't have money to meet that which we wanted done by Parliament, because we did the budget, and the financing is what we wanted to see. How was Treasury going to finance it? I know it's a painful thing for Kenyans, because without doubt it's very difficult to afford many things with the increase in fuel tax. But I think it is also a time for us to reflect and see what are these things that we need to do away with. Yes. I know some of the things will certainly hurt us as members of parliament. There is still the big question that Omogeni may want to object to. But there is a question that already is there again in the minds of Kenyans. Why is it that we have Parliament and Senate, the National Assembly and Senate? Which one of the institutions should go? There's also the big question as when is it that we are doing away with the 47 seats of Parliament? And I know these are issues that are before our committee. We think that we may want to allow Kenyans to decide as they vote 2022. But the issues that are being discussed in our committee, these institutions that may have to go as a way of reducing the expenditure in the country. But come Tuesday, I don't expect much. We will certainly want to hear our views on the floor, but I don't expect us shooting down what has come from the president. I don't see us getting those numbers in short. It's not going to be easy to get the numbers. One is already there are quite a number of people who are already traveling out of the country. Two, there are those who will not want to support it. So a combination of a couple of factors will deny us the 2/3.
So a combination of factors, but those who will not want to support it, they won't show up. Is that what you
some
mean?
of them, and
if we have such a critical bill on the house, or in the house for that matter, does it mean that people who also are traveling cannot be recalled?
They can be recalled,
yeah.
but I'm also saying that the fact that they are recalled does not mean they'll come and vote the way you think. They will come and want to, like I personally want to get to see the supplementary budget myself. I can, listening to the leader of majority, he said we will see the bill today. It is today that it will hit the table of the clerk, or the clerk's table. Then we'll look at it and really get to discuss the issues coming from the supplementary budget. As it is, I don't know whether you have a copy of it, or it is if it's a copy, or is what we have gathered from. Of course, I'm sure media has ways of gathering information. But it is because one of the things that I have seen from the social media and other quarters is that some of the issues like which the media is saying have been reduced have not been touched. And that is the word we have from the majority leader. So it may be that we are addressing something very different from what may come on the table. But having said that, let me also say that the president is running his second term. And it is during the second term that we would expect any person who is running his final term to do some of the very painful things that cannot be done when you are looking for votes, because you'll be punished by the voter. But things that perhaps will benefit the country going forward. And this is the debate that we will need to have. And it's really the difference between leadership and electioneering, looking for votes and reading. And you have an opportunity to show leadership during the second term. I really want to hear that the president knows where he would want to leave the country, however painful it may be.
So it seems, Dr. Shem Ochuodho, you have something to say before I ask a question. Yes.
Debarl, I just wanted to say, even as we talk about this issue, let's not forget the Wanjiku and the Kipchoges. They are the ordinary Kenyan, because there are many stakeholders here. There's the executive, there is the legislature, but they are the ordinary Kenyans. I happen now to be part of that ordinary Kenyans like yourselves. As we decry this matter, there are ordinary Kenyans doing fantastic jobs. We must not forget to compliment Eliud Kipchoge and the other patriots.
Yes.
But having said that, Debarl, I think we should not be emotional on this matter. It requires very sober analysis. And maybe unlike my colleagues, I wouldn't just say that it's not just MPs running out of options. Actually, it's Kenya as a whole that's running out of options, because we have overborrowed. I feel so saddened that we are still thinking of borrowing more. To the extent that, and I have said it on this bench before, I think we have too many lawyers in the kitchen. We probably need to have a few more economists so that we run government properly. As it were, my younger brother, Mheshimiwa Jared here, is selectively reading the Constitution. The Article 1 does not only talk of through representatives, he forgets the first part. The Kenyans may decide to exercise that right directly. So even though the MPs may be thinking of impeaching the president, I've provisioned in the Constitution that Kenyans have not used, and I want to remind Kenyans to think of it, is a recall of parliamentarians. We can also impeach them as the ordinary Kenyans. Mm-hmm. So this is an option we all have. So before we even think of impeaching, and I think with due respect here to the president, I think the fact that he gave it a consideration, and I think he's between a very deep sea and a hard rock, because we have overborrowed. We have IMF on the one hand, we have the Kenyan people to satisfy their requirements. We already overtaxed, as it were. We're one of the most taxed countries. So obviously there can't be easy options. But rather than to grandstand, I think as Kenyans we need to have a conversation. And if our leaders can do it at their level, the legislature and the executive, much so the better. But even when they do it, they should not forget public participation, which is provided in the Constitution. I'm sure if you asked our economists, I'm not talking of IMF economists, of course they have some of the best world economists, but we also have domestic experts. If we consulted them, we'll get an answer out of this quagmire we are in. Mm-hmm. So in as much as I'm grateful that the president made an attempt to reduce, as to whether reducing to 8% is good enough, I'm not too sure about that. But what options do we have? For me, the beginning point is the bloated government that we have.
Right.
The starting point is this CSS.
The austerity measures. We shall look at that moving on. And what options do we have? Of course, I'm hearing impeachment, and right. I don't know where impeachment will come through. Is it impeachment of the CS that is underperforming, or is he also caught up with the forces, that are running this particular sector as well, right? So what will be the options? That will be delving deeper on. But the question will be, so far, come tomorrow, if we know that we're needing 233, at least two-thirds of the House tomorrow, and it's a no-show for some of MPs, as they want to be doing, when it comes to very contentious bill as this, because they don't want to show that they are not on the side of the Kenyans, and they're not, or they are maybe on the side of the president. So they want actually to save their faces as well. So will we just be batting our heads on the wall still? Because what difference will it make, even if we had the sitting, Jared?
I'm quite optimistic that Kenyans, particularly parliamentarians, will rise to the occasion. I am surprised that my brother, Honorable Kioni, is not in sync with the voices of the Kenyans. And he's confirming that not yet. We are not there yet. But, we have been here because of a penchant for cheap loans. This is a government that keeps on, applying for loans from morning to evening. Both locally and abroad. And by the way, that is what has made it very difficult for you and I to access loans from financial institutions here, because banks look at our government as the best client. So why deal with an individual who may default and at the end of the day run away with their money together with the collateral? So we are here because of what this government has done and has continued to do. Even as we speak, just last week, they were in China negotiating for additional loans. That is what has brought us to the brink. But they are still more than willing to continue with the same scheme.
Yes.
So I think, firstly, we need to put a stop to this roughshod borrowing from the government. Then we have to reevaluate ourselves. As much as my brother Kioni is very right that the amendment is coming before the clerk today,
yes.
What has been flagged by the media is that Uhuru Kenyatta has gone straight to the CDF allocations together with the national government funds on affirmative action. So if 2.5% of the GDP, of the country's revenue, is what is drawing interest from the executive. Yet he has 82.5% in the executive. And much of the pilferages that we see, and together with the misuse of public funds, are actually with the ministries. We see them every day in our local dailies,
Yes.
how they abuse the public finance. So if they can divert their attention a different way, yet where the pilferages are safeguarded, then we are losing it as a country. But I'm sure that tomorrow we are going to marshal 233 members of parliament. Remember, when that finance bill left parliament,
Yes.
the president just left the country for China, where he stayed for a bit of time. When he came back, in the interest of complementarity and in the interest of dialogue, he ought to have asked Parliament to sit down with him and look at those items one after another. What did he do? He unilaterally brought it back with his own amendments. And now he has summoned my brother Jeremiah Kioni together with his colleagues for a dress down tomorrow in State House, a few hours before they come to the House. That is not how government is run. We have an enabling environment now where the people's president has accepted to work with President Uhuru Kenyatta. It doesn't cost much to bring the two factions together on a dialogue and go through, you know, those most fundamental subjects in the finance bill so that we can thrash them out as a one unitary body. But what do? They sit, Uhuru sits in State House, makes his own amendments, perhaps with the intervention of a few, and it is brought back to us. So what we are going to do as members of parliament is to bring it down fast, then let negotiations follow. But I think it is punitive to subject Kenyans to more taxation when they cannot even afford basics.
But don't tell us that you, the members of parliament, were none the wiser with this particular finance bill, because you had all the time in the world before the 30th of August, right? Because you actually came up with this proposal under the wire when you know the 1st of September is coming to, you know, into effect. But you had all the time in the world knowing that this finance bill will come to, you know, it will take its effect on the 1st of September. So why are we talking about negotiations and the president now, you know, turning it down to 8%, while you had the time to bring a negotiation to raise these questions and the scruples that you might have had with the proposal itself?
Well, even the president...
For us, it really sounds very hypocritical that right now is when you're really making all this hue and cry, and you knew this thing will come into effect. Let's hear from...
Brother Debarl, just before you invite him, the budget-making process takes time, and that is why we have Budget and Appropriations Committee. It goes through several stages, up to Treasury and back and forth, so it takes a bit of time. But remember, when the bill was taken to the president, he wasn't here. He had not left the country, but I think he was leaving the same night.
Yeah, but we're not really talking about the president.
Before the 1st
when did we know? Because I know, as a newsman, I've been actually talking about this particular bill coming into effect 1st of September. Even with our panelists here, that yes, come 1st of September, the fuel prices will go up, 16% VAT will be added. So the question of the president being in the country or not was not there. Let me tell you. Talking about
let me
explain. Allow us to so that it is not a monologue.
Yes, let's hear from. Could we hear from Okong'o? Then we come to you. Yes, please. For the interest of sequence.
Yeah, I think you know, Debarl, there is an article in the Constitution 159, which obligates the judiciary to do substantive justice and not dwell on technicalities. And I want to borrow the same to Parliament, that even if a mistake was done,
yes,
the major function of National Assembly under Article 95(2) is to deliberate and resolve issues that affect the people. And I think when Junet Mohammed moved that amendment,
yes,
he was, I think, acting in accordance with Article 95. So even if a mistake was done, what Junet Mohammed did is fully backed by what the Constitution obligates members of parliament to do. And there was nothing wrong, Debarl, in
Article
that
95, what?
two, you know,
Two.
the role of parliament.
Yeah, the National Assembly deliberate on and resolve issues of concern to the people.
To the people.
Yeah.
So I think what was on the table, that amendment of removing 16% of VAT and the zero rating, is an issue that affects the people. It was timeless, and you have not heard the president say that that amendment was illegal, it was unconstitutional. He says Parliament acted in accordance with its constitutional powers, but I want to veto that decision, return that bill back to Parliament, again as permitted by this Constitution, and recommend that the MP should consider putting the VAT at 8%. I mean, what the people of Kenya need to know is that, again, the president is acknowledging that he cannot act suo motu on his own. He must send this back to Parliament. And what we should underline, and I want my colleague Kioni to understand this, it is going back to the members of Parliament for consideration. So they may agree with the president, or they can defy the president and say, we want to stand with the proposed amendment of zero rating VAT on petroleum. So again, the ball has shifted back to Parliament. The last say is with the members of the National Assembly. If they choose to go to State House, I didn't know they have been summoned to State House tomorrow, and get a dressing down and come and sing the tune at the executive, that will be a very sad day. Because the new constitution envisages a situation where members of Parliament are independent, even PSC as an independent budget away from the executive, so that you have no reason to fear that if I make a decision on this bill this way, then I'll get a backlash from the executive. You have nothing to lose by being independent, but you have everything to gain by standing with the people, by being sensitive to the suffering of the people. And I think that's what you expect from my good friend Kioni. Finally, Debarl. My colleague Kioni chairs a very key parliamentary committee on the implementation of the Constitution. And you know, if we were to be honest to ourselves and talk to each other, not at each other, talk to each other, the major problem we have is that we are not respecting this Constitution that the people of Kenya enacted in 2010.
Yes.
There are a number of offices that we have created which have no room on this Constitution, but which is overburdening the Kenyan people. Look at these offices you call CAS. Yes, you cabinet, what? Cabinet
administration.
Yeah. I mean,
secretary.
I'm telling you, if we sat on a table, if I was called to State House and I had a discussion with the president, I will begin by telling him those offices are unconstitutional. And that is what is actually making the government to see that it's spending a lot of money on constitutional offices, which are not in the Constitution. Look at what is called CDF. Actually, you know, CDF is actually a national government constituency development fund.
We shall come to that.
You know,
we shall come to
so
that.
if I, just to conclude, is that the solution can even come from this committee of Kioni. If we were to audit the decisions we have made and do away with everything that we think is unconstitutional.
Welcome back. You're watching This Is a Point here on AM Live. Of course, looking at the politics of the week that has been. But before we drill deeper on that, we want to see also what is happening internationally. And of course, beginning here in Kenya, back in Berlin, where we had our own making us proud. Kenya's Olympic marathon champion, Eliud Kipchoge, set a sensational world record over the distance, shaving more than a minute off the previous best with a dazzling run in Berlin, Germany. 33-year-old Kipchoge, widely seen as the greatest marathon runner of the modern era, defended his title from last year's Berlin Marathon with an official time of 2 hours, 1 minute and 39 seconds on a sunny and warm autumn day along the flat inner city course to beat Dennis Kimeto's world best by a minute and 18 seconds set in Berlin back in 2014. Kipchoge is also a former world champion over 5,000 meters and marathon gold medalist at the Rio de Janeiro Olympics in 2016. He started off with a sizzling pace and quickly shook off his biggest opponent, Wilson Kipsang, who ought to make it a one-man race. It was clear after the opening few kilometers that Kipchoge's only opponent will be the clock and his three pacemakers who were pushed to the limit to keep the tempo high. Kipchoge kept up the pace to sprint through the Brandenburg Gate and complete a world record run that cements his reputation.
Paul ran 2 hours, 1 minute and some seconds. So I'm really happy and I'm grateful to those who actually worked with me closely. You know, in sport they say, train well and show yourself approved in a race. So it shows that I trained for the last 4 months in a positive and in a good way. That's why I was really having a full faith in my Philip. What next is that I need to run another 202 because I have 200, 201. Now I don't have 202, and I have 203 and 204 and 205. It will be planned in my records.
And we, of course, in Ethiopia, the leaders of Ethiopia and Eritrea have signed a historic peace treaty that was in Saudi Arabia, Jeddah, marking the end of a 20-year war between the two African nations. Saudi Arabia's King Salman, accompanied by his son, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, hosted the signing ceremony between Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki and Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. The war that broke out in 1998 over the border and other issues killed an estimated 80,000 people before fighting ended in 2000 in a contested peace deal. Since signing an agreement in Asmara on July the 9th to restore ties, Eritrea and Ethiopia have moved swiftly to sweep away 2 decades of hostility since conflict erupted between the two neighbors in the Horn of Africa. The signing follows the reopening of the crossing points on their shared border, cementing a stunning reconciliation and giving Addis Ababa a direct route to its former foes' Red Sea ports. Prime Minister Theresa May called Boris Johnson's suicide bomb-vest description of Brexit negotiations completely inappropriate and urged Brits to focus on the delivery of Brexit instead of leadership. In an interview with the BBC's Paranormal program this week, last week, former Foreign Secretary Johnson had likened May's Brexit plan to wrapping a suicide bomb vest around the British Constitution and handing over the trigger to the European Union's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier.
Boris Johnson says this plan that you've agreed to on Ireland, it's a suicide belt around the British Constitution.
Well, first of all, I have to say I think that choice of language was completely inappropriate. I've been Home Secretary, was Home Secretary for 6 years and as Prime Minister for 2 years now. I think using language like that was not right, and it's not language I would have used. But let's look at the argument about the issue in relation to Northern Ireland. The people of Northern Ireland deserve to be listened to in these negotiations by the UK government as people elsewhere in this country. I want to ensure that as we go forward, we have that strong union, that Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, and it's important that we deliver for the people of Northern Ireland. They don't want a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. The only proposal that's been put forward that delivers on them not having that hard border and ensures that we don't carve up the United Kingdom is the Chequers plan.
You told your party that you'd only serve as long as they wanted you to. Without getting into dates, because you're never going to do that in a television interview. Can you reassure people in your party that you're not determined to go on and on and on? You'll listen.
Look, I said what I said to my party. Throughout my time in public service, it has been about service. As a councillor, as an MP, as a Home Secretary, and now as Prime Minister. But actually, this is where I get a little bit irritated. This debate is not about my future. This debate is about the future of the people of the UK and the future of the United Kingdom. That's what I'm focused on, and that's what I think we should all be focused on. It's ensuring that we get that good deal from the European Union, which is good for people in the UK, wherever they live in the UK. That's what's important for us, and that's what I'm focusing on. It's the future of people in the UK that matters.
You know what some people say? They rather liked it when you joked about being that bloody difficult woman. They like that. And they sometimes say, where's she gone? We want her back.
Well, she's still there. But I think there's a difference between those who think you can only be bloody difficult in public and those of us who think, actually, you bide your time and you're bloody difficult when the time is right and when it really matters.
And in the meantime, London Mayor Sadiq Khan said that the British public should have a say on the outcome of the Brexit negotiations, including the option to hold a second referendum on Britain's European Union membership. Khan told the BBC's Andrew Marr show that Britain was now facing either a bad deal or a no-deal Brexit, both of which will be hugely damaging to London and their country.
Independent research undertaken for us shows that no deal would lead to 500,000 fewer jobs, 87,000 fewer jobs in London alone, and £50 billion less investment in our country. That's bad for our country, hugely damaging to London and our country.
So you're against Brexit, and that is familiar, but on the idea of a second referendum, you have changed your mind quite dramatically.
This is really important. I'm not one of those advocating for a rerun. I'm not a referendum guy. What I'm saying is, for the first time ever,
we need a second referendum.
The British public should have a say on the outcome of the negotiations, including what the Prime Minister negotiates with the EU, plus the option of staying in the EU.
And elsewhere, around 500 people demonstrated in St. Petersburg against planned increases in Russia's pension age, a week after hundreds were detained for protesting against the reform that has hurt President Vladimir Putin's approval rating. The proposed change, already amended by Putin, envisaged raising the retirement age for men from 60 to 65 and from 55 to 60 for women, and is the most unpopular government measure in Russia since the 2005 move to scrap Soviet-era benefits. Sunday's protest in Russia's second-largest city was smaller than rallies a week ago in 80 towns and cities that were organized by jail opposition leader Alexei Navalny. More than 800 people were detained during those demonstrations, the bulk of them in St. Petersburg, after the authorities were there initially authorized a rally before reversing their decisions. The local branch of the Interior Ministry said that around 500 people had taken part in the protest, which was held without gross violations of public order.
Друзья, наш путь на митинг был очень трудный.
Она нам надоела. И это митинг не только против пенсионной реформы.
Let's buckle down to some sports where, under study, some query came from the verge of two sets down to pull off a remarkable four-set victory over Croatia's talisman, Marin Cilic, and draw the United States level at 2-2 in the Davis Cup Wild Group semi-final in Zadar. Query drafted in by U.S. captain Jim Courier as a replacement for his number one, Steve Johnson, was one set down and served 5 straight sets points in the second before rallying to earn a shock 6-7, 7-6, 6-3, 6-4 win. It left the tie resting on the outcome of Bona Koric's match with U.S. debutant Francis Defoe in the 5th rubber, with the winner guaranteed to take his country into November's final against France, who beat Spain in the other semi. The U.S. has been 2-love down after Friday's opening singles, but clung on to the hope of reaching their first final in 11 years, with 40-year-old Mike Bryan and Ryan Harrison had to fight courageously to win a 5-set doubles on Saturday. Reyes was rewarded for a bold, if slightly desperate-looking move when he gambled on throwing a query into the must-win 4th rubber, even though the 30-year-old had never previously beaten Cilic in 6 attempts. Right, we continue with the conversation. I pace here with the panelists today. I'm holding court this morning with Senator Okong'o Omogeni from Nyamira County. Also, we have Jared Okello, who is a member of parliament from Nayndo. We have also as well Dr. Shem Ochuodho, who is the global leader of Kenya Diaspora Alliance, and also Jeremiah Kioni, who is also member of parliament from Ndaragwa. We are eagerly waiting for Pogiso, who seemed he can't really make it this morning. I think he had a technical hitch with his car today in the morning. But we continue this conversation. Right now we want to see what is the way forward as far as austerity measures is concerned, because we've been talking a good game about austerity measures, the wanton wastage in this country. It is mind-boggling. And that's where we need to stem one by one. If the president is really talking good about austerity measures, he should show an example in the first place. First of all, if we may hark back to his first term, they were talking about the 20%, cut off from their salary. That went to the public. A few individuals actually took up the 20% salary cut, but it tapered off. We were talking about also the parastatals being merged, so that we, in a bid to actually save money in this country. We had the report from the task force. It is still gathering dust somewhere. Nothing has been in. By the way, also, we just know that chairmen are being appointed every day to some of these parastatals. Let's just begin from there. You talked about the CDF. And of course, also we had the senator, I think the senator of Murang'a, that is Senator Kangata. He was coming up with a ward bill as well.
Yeah.
A ward bill which is just similar to, what was it about?
I think it was...
It's a ward fund bill, isn't it?
Ward Development Fund.
Ward Development Fund.
Yeah.
Which I wonder, how dramatically different is a Ward Development Fund from the CDF? And you're still getting money from the exchequer going to the counties as well.
Yep.
This is some of the things that really talk about. I mean, what is the rhyme or reason of coming up with such bill as well, if you have the CDF in the first place?
I think Debarl, as I was saying before we went to get international news,
yes,
is that we need to audit our government vis-a-vis the 2010 constitution that was enacted in 2010, and have more discipline in our government. Now, you're talking about an attempt by the government to reduce a number of offices.
Yes.
But, there are some which just require the bold decision of His Excellency the President. I'll give you an example. Now, in our constitution, we can create up to a maximum of 22 offices for cabinet secretaries.
Yes.
But there is a leeway in the number of principal secretaries that can serve in a particular ministry. Mm-hmm. And because of playing politics with our, the way we create public offices, there are some ministries which have up to 4 principal secretaries. Just one ministry, one CS, has about 4 principal secretaries. Just the other day, I saw a bill in Parliament. Members of Salaries Remuneration Commission have been serving part-time. But I saw a bill now that is converting those offices into full-time. I mean, that's an additional expenditure on the executive. Now, you talk about the National Government Constituency Development Fund. This is a fund where the government is sending money down to the constituencies to undertake some developments. Now, instead of the government doing what it does to secondary schools, where it sends development fund to support infrastructure direct to the schools, which, sending money to constituencies is a good thing. We create another entity and say we want to create a committee to run the National Government Constituency Development Fund. I mean, that's another added expenditure to the executive. So what I'm saying is, if we were to sit down and talk to each other and agree that we have a problem in the way we are running government, what measures can we take, even before we talk of scrapping Senate, reducing members of parliament from 349, I don't know what number. There are steps that we can take, even leaving the constitution the way it is today, and reduce expenditure in government. Finally, you remember there's a time the president gave directives that cabinet secretaries should use, I think, vehicles with less than 2,000 cc. Ask anybody. I see them coming to the Senate with 4 big Prados, with chase cars. And I ask, as the government left their CSS on the loose to do what they want and how, and spend whichever way they want to spend, is there any discipline in government, beginning from the CSS down to the PSS?
Thank you.
Now, if we do that audit and see where the rain started beating us, and we have a president who is in charge, you can, rain down on his own government, we will reduce expenditure. We will not even be looking at this 16% from fuel levy.
Let's hear from Dr. Shem Ochuodho.
Debarl, I think the beginning point for me has got to be value for money. Even though we spent a good amount of time, the parliamentarians spent a good amount of time deliberating on the budget, but what happens post-expenditure? For example, last year we had a budget, I think it was a little over 2 trillion shillings. Have we audited to know how well was it spent? Was there any surpluses? Were there any deficits? I think that's one thing that we need to find a way to do, so that even after budgeting, at the end of the financial year, we look at what did we do right, what did we not do right. I have a case in mind, the SGR, the Mombasa-Nairobi. When the idea was first floated about 10 years ago or so, I think there was talk of 80 billion shillings doing it all the way. Nobody has ever cared to explain to us how come that just Mombasa-Nairobi ultimately took 320 billion. We are talking of what some may call small change. When we are haggling about 35 billion, yet we cannot explain how 320 billion has been used and whether there was a case of value for money. So for me, I think in as much as we are all concerned about recurrent budget,
yes.
And there's a bloated government, there's no doubt. But even money that goes, particularly the loans that we took, there's Eurobond and there are the other loans, was there value for money? Can we account for them? Because if we just had value for money for just one of them, even like the SGR, suppose we saved even just 100 billion. I mean, it would solve this many problems we are talking about. So for me, value for money must be key. But also the aspect of tightening the belt, it must apply across board. When members of parliament castigate CSS for driving the 4-wheel guzzlers, it's like the case of the bottle and kettle. I also see members of parliament doing the same. In our days in parliament, and I happen to have been in the 8th parliament that first proposed the CDF.
Yes.
Maybe we didn't think through it too well, because there are those who have said there's a contradiction, and I think it's a constitutional contradiction. Well, why do members have a role in it? I think that's an issue that we should look at, because members of parliament are not supposed to execute. They are meant to give oversight of how that money is spent. So finding a way of how best to spend this money. I'm a firm supporter of the CDF, the national government CDF, but let's find a proper way that's within the constitution of how it's managed. But lastly, in terms of reducing the size of government, obviously we must have short-term interventions, immediate-term interventions, as well as long-term. There are some which are long-term, like reducing the size of government. That can only be a long-term intervention.
Could we begin with the short-term, then we look at the long-term? What are the options on the table moving forward, if at all nothing really happens with the bill tomorrow? So what is the way forward as far as austerity measure is concerned? Jared?
Well, thank you. Let me just make some clarification here. My brother, Honorable Omogeni, alluded to the CSS with big cars and chase cars and a litany of other aids around them, because they draw that directly from the government. Members of parliament buy their own vehicles and they fuel their own vehicles, as opposed to what the government does, for those expanded offices. I think that is what my brother meant. But, you know, let's look at the very basics at a mundane level.
But from my understanding also, there is grants that you get from the government, yeah?
Right.
You can tell us about these grants, because you have grants and then you have loans.
Sure.
We don't really understand why you should be given a loan, then you're given a grant.
Well, a loan has to be repaid.
Yeah, it has to be repaid, but
it has to be repaid.
I think it was a grant for what? For the car and a loan for the car.
With due respect.
Yes, please. Could we just get a clarification? Why do we normally have a grant for the car and a loan for the car? For me, it doesn't make any lick of sense. Dr. Shem Ochuodho.
Yeah,
he wants to intervene on this, or you can clarify. Or Jared.
No, my premise, Debarl, is that I take it that MPs are in the employment of Parliament. Even if it's money they buy, they get money from the public to buy. There's no denying that our MPs are overpaid. I think that's where it has to begin. So even though we are telling the executive reduce the expenditure, let Parliament also do the
let Jared clarify. I don't want him to, yes.
Just as you say you don't want to, I also don't want to delve very much into this because that is not what brought us here. But I would want to say this.
No, but we're talking about austerity measures. How do we tighten the loose ends?
5 million shillings is given to members of Parliament to buy vehicles. And it is subjected to taxation. You understand, and perhaps you've been in the motor market, you know the prices of vehicles out there. Even when that is given to a member of Parliament, it is subjected to taxation. You still have to top up to get a vehicle that can go the terrains of Nyando constituency and maybe many others. But what I was saying is that the CSS get vehicles from the government, not just one. They get more than one. Fueled by the government, serviced by the government. Members of Parliament service and fuel their own vehicles. Besides getting additional money to buy a vehicle that can withstand the terrains that they drive on. So I think that has to be made clear. The notion out there is that members of Parliament are in the business of, you know, abusing and misusing public resources, and people pay less attention to what happens within the executive. The budget to the presidency, the office of the president itself, is more than 5 times the money that comes to Parliament. And no one wants to talk about this. But that is for another day. Let us now come back to the main topic of the day. I'd wanted to say that at a very mundane level, even at a family level, when you are hard-pressed economically, you don't buy new clothes. But we just saw last week, our government, through the police wing, brought in new uniforms that were paid for at a time when we are saying this country doesn't have money. And there was no problem, absolutely, with the past uniforms. So those are things that we need to look at. Secondly, just on the same topic of the police, they are now being told to vacate their homes where they're living absolutely for free and get integrated within communities and pay for those houses. And the government is saying they're going to avail additional monies in the name of house allowance to pay to these police officers. When you are in a cash crunch, you want to cut back. You don't want to overspend. But we see this happen every now and again. My brother, Honorable Omogeni, has talked about the CS, a ministry, a function that is not even in the Constitution. But we are talking about a ballooned wage bill, yet we are very hesitant and apprehensive to take them back, or rather reduce these unconstitutional offices. But we see, you know, the executive is very at ease when they have to do this. Now, you look at the budget that has gone to defense, for instance. This is a country that is not at war with anybody. We are not at war with our neighbors. We are not at war with any foreign country. And we are not at war with ourselves. So you ask yourself, why all this money is going to defense as a department? So this is the time when we also need to employ austerity measures that would reduce such kind of wastages. And even the security itself, the internal security. Mm-hmm. We know that this country, after every electoral cycle, it is bound to have, you know, some discord where people riot, protesting, stolen elections. And we've had stolen elections four times in a row. So that is the period where I think we need to inject more money to buy tear gas, buy more batons, and many other security apparatus. But when we have to, at a time like this, when there is absolute peace, still injecting additional funding into this security department.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense at all.
Thank you.
So finally, we also need to seal all the corruption loopholes. From the Auditor General, we have heard that between 400 billion to 600 billion are lost at the end of the financial year to corruption. Yet what we are juggling with now, as regards IMF, is 71 billion shillings only. That is why Kenyans are being subjected to 16%
Thank you.
on fuel.
Right.
Let's cut back on corruption, address issues of pilferages and wastages, and then let the country move forward, as we are now, without tampering with any taxation.
All right, just cutting down on corruption has turned out to be rhetoric. As far as this country is, yeah, we can talk about corruption, and we've been talking a good game about corruption, cutting down on corruption, but it is turning out to be just a rhetoric. Let's hear from Jeremiah Kioni.
Thank you, Debarl.
Let's look at solutions. Long term, you talk of long-term solutions and the short-term solutions as we are here right now, because we're in a crisis.
One of the things that I would want to clarify even before I come to solution is that we will be going to State House tomorrow to attend our parliamentary group meeting. So we have been invited to attend the PG. So we have not been summoned. I think my colleagues are used to being summoned by Baba. We have been spared from such harsh ways of being called. We've been invited to State House tomorrow morning, and I'm sure among other issues we'll certainly be debate on this issue, the parliament supplementary budget. And I don't see anything wrong with that, because we belong to the party that is in government. And when you go looking for votes and associating with your party, you want your party to win and run the country. And if you wanted your party to win and run the country, it's always important to consult. You have to consult with the executive. So nobody should try and demonize that. It's one of the things that you cannot. In fact, it's even worse when members of parliament are not even discussing with the executive. I remember it was still in this panel that somebody asked me the other day whether we ever have PGs. Now that there is one, again, it is termed as summoning. And this talks to a populist statement vis-a-vis leadership. And leadership means you have to swallow the pill, even if it's painful. And that's where we are, Debarl, at this time. We have talked about CDF, and again, we have Senator Omogeni at the Senate. And what pains some of us is that if you look at CDF, and you may continue struggling to place it within the Constitution, given the kind of governance structure that we have. But in terms of impact, the impact the CDF has in a constituency cannot be compared with what the governors are doing. And I think the Senate they need to lean on the governors. And there is a lot of wastage. Instead of having units that were meant to create wealth, create some employment, all of them have become employment bureaus. And you find them with economic advisors, political advisors, a litany of officers who really mean nothing to the people within any of the constituent of the counties. So I think we really need to lean on the county government, because there is a lot of wastage. Even as we talk about wastage at the executive level, you can't now compare it with what we are seeing at the county level. And I would want to be taken on that at any point. There is wastage in form of corruption. There is wastage in the employment. You look at the governor and the chase cars that they are having. Some of them have even a heavier motorcade than that of the president. The red carpet is now all over, including when I think people are going to the toilet, they have a red carpet, and I'm talking, and that is not in Baptist. I've seen it.
You've seen it?
Really, and even photos of the same carpet, red carpet to those mobile toilets. I mean, it's all waste, you know. I mean, really something must be done by the Senate, because any other person trying to get in there, you will look like you have interfered with something else, with an area that is not within your mandate. But we've talked about corruption. And I want to say also, unlike ever before, I think the fight against corruption this time now is more convincing than it has ever been before. And if that's the benefit we are getting from the handshake, I think it is worth every minute that we have spent shaking each other's hand. Because without that, look at the demolitions that are going on, and you will find some Kenyans saying, oh, why don't we turn this building into a school? We can turn it to a school like some were suggesting at the Taj Mahal. What is it called? Taj Mahal. But then, what have you told the country? That you can still continue stealing and get away with it somehow by being, being a very magnanimous person to the country. I think the message needs to be clear. You've got it wrong. You got it wrong from the beginning. It's wrong all the way. Okay. So the fight we need to support, and some of these things we need, and that's what I'm talking about, being a populist and showing some leadership. We need to support this fight on corruption, because it is part of what will help us save some of the funds that are already going into waste. In our committee, in fact, I was looking at something that you see the contradictions are not just in our own sitting here. I'm looking at the president of Tanzania, Tanzanian President John Magufuli.
That's in the East African.
It's in the East African,
yes.
Page 2. And he is saying family planning is for the poor. And he's telling me you should have more children. And then, you know him, he has two. And he's telling it is for the poor, have more children. And then at the same time, he goes ahead and says, any girls who get pregnant in school should never be admitted back. You know, these are just the populist thing. You cannot see any line of thought, a clear line of thought. It's really back and forth. But we had an opportunity of sitting with the Auditor General and control of budget in our committee. And they did last, I think during the term of last 11 parliament, an audit of the constitution, the expense. And all of them came to the same conclusion. And they said, what we have is a case of overrepresentation. But our constitution, as it is, if we have to deliver on what it promises Kenyans, there must be wages that must be paid. And they actually say that it's not, they were kind of saying, we can't quite talk about a bloated wage bill, per se. It is that we need to look at its duplication of laws that are there. And if we are able to streamline some of those areas, we may do some savings, but certainly they have a case of asking us to deal with the issue of overrepresentation. When the Junet tabled this amendment in Parliament, there was a very simple question that was asked by some of us. I said, fine, we have played to the gallery, because that's what we did. We played to the gallery. You passed a budget of this amount, X amount of money. The government has told you how to raise money to fund this budget is through this way. You've now told them you cannot raise it through here. But you did not come this side to say, because we are not going to raise it through 16%, we are going to do away with these issues. So what the president is already doing, we saw it coming. You cannot stop me from raising funds and you expect me to perform some functions. We didn't go the full hog. What we did was just playing to the gallery, because like you said, you yourself you were on our case every time you were here. What are you doing with this 16%, blah, blah, blah. And at that 11th hour, and that amendment was passed through. But to some of us, we knew the president would set it back. Because how were we going to fund the other aspects that we laced and we put in the budget? Now the president has said 8% according to what we are gathering from and what he said himself, and a lot of other measures which we are going to find out and get to it. And I want to agree with my colleagues. There are offices that needs to be done away with, and that this is the other painful thing that we must do. And even this overrepresentation is an issue that Kenyans must now deal with, and we require some courage. And I'm saying some of these offices that cannot be done away with easily, why don't we pose a question during the 2022 elections? You are voting for the 6 positions, yes?
So it comes as a referendum.
Yes, and instead of incurring another expense in learning another program, the same day when you are voting for the 6 positions, we also ask you, out of these 6 positions, which do you think we should do away with? Not immediately, but maybe 2027, 2032. And that will save us from the amount of money that we are going to spend running on a campaign. Because Debarl, and I think that is what we will do in the committee. But I also wanted to say this, that we cannot run away from this.
Could you hold on to that thought we just hear from Okong'o before you come to
before that, let me just say this, because one of the reasons why we are where we are is because we learned our presidential elections twice last year. And we are told for every day that we were in abeyance, it costed us X amount of money. Some have said 1 billion shillings an hour. And we need to learn from those mistakes. My colleague would say that they will continue talking about stolen elections, and we have allowed them to have that as their second name. But the thing is that to us, it was a mistake done by the judiciary. I mean, when you say numbers don't matter, and yet numbers clearly spoke, and they spoke again.
Thank you.
We would have saved ourselves this kind of a mess that we are in.
Okong'o, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I think, first, we were here sometime, and somebody asked, where did we drop the ball from President Kibaki to Uhuru? And I think the one thing I find very uncomfortable is, and I'm not trying to put Mheshimiwa Kioni on the spot, is this idea when there is an issue for members of parliament to debate and make a decision, the executive summons them to State House, and we talk to each other. Then when they come back, they tell you, this is what we have been told to do. We can't go against what the president has said. That's, if you borrow from the way Kibaki used to run government and affairs of governance, he never interfered with the members of parliament. And I think the president on this one, he should have left the members of parliament to meet tomorrow, deliberate this issue without feeling like they are under pressure from the executive. And then they make a decision either to agree or to disagree. But take this to the bank, Debarl. Tomorrow, when they come out of State House, watch the voting pattern, they will all say, this is what we have been told to do. That is a big indictment on our performance as members of parliament. Number two, we don't need to go that route of saying we want to put issues on when we vote in 2022. You have seen somebody has just posed a question on the Star, and you're talking about short-term measures. He's saying the president, that's corridors of power. The president is crying and saying we have a problem running government because of the expensive implementation of the 2010 Constitution. But somebody is asking, Mr. President, you have failed to mention, you can see the last line there, you have failed to mention your own creation.
Which is that?
It's the first one, up there.
On Friday,
You see, down there, the last 3 lines, he says, you have failed to mention your own creation of chief administrative secretaries. Yes, you can see that.
Yeah.
So, some of these things are of our own making.
Yes.
When you're talking about trimming government and the ballooning wage bill, it is there. You can see it in the offices we have created which don't have room in our constitution. And I think that's what I was saying. The president does not need to say that I'm going to the poor Kenyan to overtax this poor Kenyan, make life very expensive for him. He could start from himself and say, I'm issuing a statement to the Kenyan people and saying, I think the decisions I made, which may not be serving the best interest of the country, which is making running of my government expensive, costly. One of them is to say, these CAS, Cabinet Administrative Secretaries, have scrapped those positions. And you know, you will immediately save, because how much does it cost to sustain one office of a Cabinet Administrative Secretary? It's a lot of money. That's an immediate, saving. When you're talking about wastage, there is an audit report I have from my county, and it tells you that in one road, you will find that the government will put in place a contractor to fix a road. There is an emergency fund given to that contractor, to do some emergency repairs on the roads. Now that same road will still be under the Member of Parliament, under the NGCDF, under the committee. So you actually, the duplication that Mheshimiwa Kioni is saying is real. You will find on the ground that the governor is working on a road, member of government is working on a road, a contractor from the national government is working on a road. You talk about administration, duplication of roles. You will find there is a sub-county administrator appointed by a governor. You will find a DO appointed by national government. You will find a ward administrator appointed by governor. You will find another administrator appointed by national government. If we sat down and agreed that if we respect the spirit of the Kenyan Constitution and create one administrative unit, Debarl will save a lot of money, and we will not even be looking at increasing taxes on fuel to save enough money to run government. So I want to make an appeal to my president, His Excellency the President. Let him do an audit on his own government and do away with some offices that are just a burden that we don't need. Have a lean government and which can deliver services to the people of Kenya. And that will solve the problem we have on raising enough revenue to run government.
Right. Lean government, could we also begin maybe on, coming to you, Jared, where we have the parastatals? Because I think half of the wage bill in this country from the GDP really goes to paying salaries in this country. And the question that raised earlier, there is that, yes, we had a task force that was mandated to really try and streamline and, scope out what is really happening with the parastatals in a bid to try and merge these parastatals. Can we begin there? And if you're meeting the president tomorrow, can this also be something on the table in the spirit of austerity measures? Can that be effected? Can we have the report and the implementation of that particular report?
Well, I'm privy to what happened during Abdikadir's tenure in State House. And he's one of those who were mandated to look at merging of government corporations and parastatals. And I think that proposal hasn't been implemented to date. Because what they were trying to look at is, if the parastatals do exist, of what benefit do they accrue to the nation? Because then you have companies owned by government but cannot stand on their own as going concerns, and you have to pump in money from the exchequer to have them stabilize and to have them operate. So that is not good business. So in their wisdom, they said, let us merge, let us abandon, let us scrap off some of them that are not beneficial to the Kenyan people. So I think as a matter of a cost-cutting measure, we have to step back and look at what that report contained and implement it fully, so that Kenyans can, save from this overburden of taxation. But I wanted us to also look at something else. My friend has brought this issue very well to my brother Kioni, that they will be in State House tomorrow. A riot act shall be read, and when they land at the National Assembly, the voting pattern would change drastically, including those who perhaps had committed to protect the interest of the Kenyan people. Now, if a voting pattern can be tampered with up to that level, then we ask ourselves, is this country over-represented? Is it over-legislated? Because as we speak, we have got 48 county assemblies, 47 county assemblies with over 2,000 members of county assembly. Then additionally we have parliament here. Then we have the governor's office. Then we have the Senate. So is this country overrepresented and over-legislated? Now, over that same overrepresentation, if people have been sent to go into the August House to make laws, but the very laws that they are making can be changed by one single meeting under one single individual, then some of these offices ought to be scrapped so that one person can run the affairs of the country. But again, as a cost-cutting measure, I would suggest that this country then need to abandon issues of house allowance and go mortgage full-time, so that we also tend to save monies from these excess payments coming as a result of house allowances at the government level. Then we are talking about 4 points agenda or agenda 4. Let's bring it down to agenda 3, perhaps abandon housing, so that this country can look at its own budget vis-a-vis the obligation that it has with the Kenyan people. Otherwise, the 4 points agenda or agenda 4 will not be in sync with the Kenyan people. Then again, duplication of roles that we have spoken about every time and again. There are many, many offices that are interlinked and hence perform the same function, and you have 2 or 3 at both at the national and the county level. So it is high time that we cut them down to manageable levels. And finally, we also need to engage in a head count. I still believe that there are ghost workers within government that can be, we can read them out through a physical head count to ascertain how many people really serve this government.
All right. Dr. Shem, Ochuodho.
Debarl, I like being practical. For the long term, obviously, rationalization of government has to be done. I don't agree, and many Kenyans would not agree, that we need 47 counties. So that, for me, would be the starting point. But that's maybe for the long term. For the short term, we probably could borrow from what our neighbors have done. I've been privileged to work for the government of Ethiopia and the government of Rwanda. And I want to agree with my colleagues, some of these initiatives, efforts must start from the top. And by the top here, we are talking about the president, the deputy, the governors, and so on. It must start from up there. My major recommendation going forward for the immediate and short term would be what Ethiopia did, business process reengineering. The duplication we are talking about can only be sorted out by that. In fact, the case of Ethiopia, about 8 years ago, they even had a full ministry of BPR, just for looking at how is government functioning, where are the wastages, where are the duplications. And in our case, where we have multiple layers of government, the BPR will help sort that out. So if I were President Kenyatta, that's one area I would look into. How do we re-engineer government? Where are those cases where we have wastages? The second thing I would do, again, what President Kagame does very well, efficient use of resources. Every single Rwandese dollar, even if it's donor dollar or government dollar, you can always see what is done. The president himself, there are a few instances you find him driving himself in town with maybe 1 or 2 just to chase cars. So why don't we start by doing that from that very top level? Do we need the expenditures we have in the office of the president, in the office of the governor, in the office of the members of parliament? I think this must come down. In as much as I think I did say the issue of CSS, the CEA, the chief administration secretaries is critical, and with due respect, I know a few of my friends are in some of those positions. But really, I wouldn't call it unconstitutional. I would only say it's not anchored in the Constitution, and I don't think it's justified. So rationalizing government from that level, and of course that could also be captured by the BPR. But I must also say, in as much as the saving from them may not be so huge, It may not run into the 70 billion, for example, we're looking at. But the signal it sends is very strong. And this is why I want to concur with my colleagues. It's an area the president needs to relook at. Can we show Kenyans that we are really all tightening belts, and let it start from the top? Finally, in this regard, apart from the business process reengineering and everybody going for value for money, for every little public money spent both at the national and county levels, on the aspect of VAT, I think this, let's accept it, this matter has been mismanaged. Initially, if we had talked of 8%, the president reducing it, or purportedly reducing it from 16 to 8%, Kenyans would have warmly received it. But as it were, it has been mishandled. Let's totally do away with the VAT increase, because I believe there's little justification on it. There are other ways in which we can reduce expenditure through austerity measures and ensuring we have value for money.
All right. That position of the CSs, have we actually gotten a full scope of what really entails? Because if we are talking about duplication, how have we, as a country, seen the impact of the CSs as well? Jeremiah Kioni.
I think, and I agree with what...
because we've never seen any discernible difference that this particular position has created since it was created by the president.
I wanted to say that I agree with what Shem Inea has said, that it may not be unconstitutional, but it's not provided for in law. What the president did was to look for ways of accommodating some of these promises that he made when the campaigns were on. And it is only natural and normal that you will expect some of these things to continue being said. But I think what the executive was trying to do is also to help the CSs who are fairly technical in approach to issues that relate to the public, to bring in some little bit of political minds in answering, dealing with members of parliament. And as you notice that in quite a number of times, I have noticed that Shebesh, Honorable Shebesh, will appear before committees quite often. I saw Gaicho here doing the same. And they come and deal with the issues that are political in a political manner. There before you'd find the CS just getting herself or himself in trouble with politicians just because they cannot handle the political angle to issues. I think that may be the added advantage to those offices. The only thing I can see that helping.
But the spirit of actually having...
in terms of whether
I'm sorry to butt in, but the spirit of having these particular CSs in the first place, it was meant to be apolitical. The office itself,
yes,
it was meant to be purely apolitical. So the issue of having a political angle into it doesn't make any sense to us.
I think either you didn't get me or you have chosen to just say something different. That
is it?
What I said. Well, let me see what I was saying. You see, when you go before parliamentary committees, you are dealing with politicians, and we have seen CSs just get lost, unable to articulate their issue because they cannot see the political angle to it. Not political partisanship, but the politics that members of parliament come with when they are coming on board. And you need to be well versed with it for you to be able to continue pushing your agenda in an nonpartisan manner. That is the angle that 11th Parliament, the executive during the 11th Parliament failed to do. And as they were nearing the elections, the issue is that you had delivered, yes, but you didn't have people who can say how you have delivered it. It's that political mouth that was supposed to have been brought on board by the CSs. As to whether we can justify it is another debate. I think, in my opinion, it is those are positions that we may need to do away with. But on the issue of parastatals, again, I agree completely. We really need to merge them. The only reason I think they were not merged again was the politics that seems to have crowded out what Abdikadir and team had done. In our committee, we are also looking at some of these commissions. There are some commissions that need to be merged. I know there are also proposals on our table to merge the Kenya National Human Rights Commission and the Gender Commission because they seem to be doing the same thing. But going back, there is an article in the Nation on page 15, done by Professor Kobia, CS of Public Service, Youth and Gender Affairs.
Margaret Kobia.
Margaret Kobia.
Yes.
And it is talking of inefficiency is the hidden cost in public service that must be rooted. And knowing her and knowing what kind of service she has offered to this country in different positions, it is something that needs to be read and thought through. And the last paragraph says, with efficient management, we can reduce wastage, seal corruption loopholes, enhance productivity, and have a more satisfied citizenry. And then, of course, she brings in the issue of the Big Four and says that through that, we are likely to achieve that dream. The issue of inefficiency also in the public service cannot be, we cannot ignore it. It needs to be, we need to deal with it, because even as we talk about the resources that we are committing to the public service, and we have a wage bill of 650 billion shillings that goes to the wage bill, what is it that we are getting out of? What is it that we are getting out of that wage bill? If we were to get the services equivalent to the kind of money that is being spent on the wage bill, Kenyans will be satisfied. We will then perhaps even grow the economy faster. But that inefficiency is a key thing that we need to deal with. Maybe as I allow others to jump in. I want to persuade my colleagues, this notion that when you go to State House, there is anybody who goes there to be dressed down. I'm trying to help them before we go there. And I don't know why they are not listening to me. I'm telling them, even if we don't go, Senator Omogeni, let me tell you, going there or not going there is not going to change some of us our minds. We are not going to pass a vote of no confidence tomorrow in the government that we support, and in a government that we ask people to vote as in to support the Jubilee government. So when we go there, certainly there will be debate on issues that needs to be done.
Thank you.
But they should not, maybe they are the ones confused with the handshake.
Thank you.
They lost their direction. They should have the one be telling us more. But now you are on our side. Kwa hivyo twende pamoja, hapana diaria sahi.
Jared, your closing remarks as we're winding up.
Well, as I close, two things. Firstly, when they appear in State House and you have over 100 people, chances are that you will get to know what has been discussed. So we are talking from a point of knowledge, not from a point of non-knowledge. Finally, this is quite different from the topic, but I want to congratulate our own Eliud Kipchoge for winning the Berlin Marathon, and not just winning, but placing a new world record. That is something that we must be proud of. I've got one major problem. When he finished the race, I had expected Brand Kenya to be right there with our flag, to give to him, wrap around him, so that he can as well market this country. What I saw was a flag belonging to a private company, a company that is not even associated with this country. So I think that is a failure on the part of Brand Kenya, but a bigger failure on the part of our embassy based in Germany. So we need, therefore, to take full advantage, especially now that we want to quicken the pace of our tourism intervention. That ought to have been the end thing, but we lost that opportunity. I want to congratulate his family, his community, those who have made him who he is today. And we are very proud as a country.
Thank you.
God bless Kipchoge.
Right, thank you, thank you. And of course, maybe we can follow up with Ambassador Magut, Dr. Magut, who is
his brother.
His brother. Right, Okong'o Omogeni.
Well,
briefly.
I just wish my colleague, Honorable Kioni, a good trip to State House.
Tomorrow.
But let him go and
I know you are missing it also. You can have your... Now that there is a handshake, you can join us.
Let him go there, have a cup of tea, but when he comes to the floor, let him be on the side of Kenyans.
Right, thank you. Let's hear from Shem.
Debarl, just an appeal to the executive and the legislature. Even as we ponder about solutions, let's not forget public participation through the national dialogue process. Finally, allow me to send condolences the constituency I used to represent, Rangwe, which included Homa Bay Town, is mourning. Both Professor Uma and Sharon allow me to empathize with the families and encourage police, particularly in the case of Sharon, to move with speed so that the perpetrators of that heinous act are brought to book.
Thank you. Finally, Jeremiah Kioni.
Congratulations to Kipchoge for this new world record and making us proud. We want to wish Professor Nyang a quick recovery. We say Paul Esana is our governor, one of the governors that we are looking up upon to try and channel or show us how county government should be managed. I think so far he's doing very well. So we would wish him a quick recovery. And don't forget the editorial of the Nation. It says a very important thing on the issues of corruption. Punish officials who facilitated the land that has been grabbed. As we continue demolishing, we must punish those people who approved, who gave out those land, who approved the drawings, who supervised the drawings, gave completion certificates. We cannot allow them to get away with it. I will be in court tomorrow very early in the morning, so just in case Omogeni thinks I have a court case that may deny me the chance to go to State House, but I want to assure them again, even if we don't go to State House, we must support the government. That's what we promise the people.
Thank you.
We're not going to walk away from them.
Right, thank you. Thank you, our panelists this morning. And of course, we eagerly wait to see what will pan out tomorrow. We shall be following that as well. And just to read some of your comments before we wind up, we have GT saying that's what I didn't understand. You hire people to do jobs being done by others already, then anakuja kusema reduce cost, right? Shaking my head there. Then we have Gamaliel Namale saying, to add to the list of county commissioners, assistant county commissioners, DOs, chiefs, and the assistant, these positions are not in the constitution, right? This is what Okong'o Omogeni was alluding to as well. Joe Babbage is saying, priorities, Uhuru Kenyatta's priorities and actions are against austerity measures. He just spent money on new uniforms, sent a big delegation to Ghana, dish out millions in Arambe's, cook for TNA tomorrow in State House to hoodwink them to pass VAT. Then Joe Kamari is saying the MPs need to have an out of self-experience in order to explore options critically for today's challenges. We need to see a balanced view devoid of baseless chest thumping and self-grandiose. Thank you very much for your valid. There are many of them, but we really do appreciate also your valid company. Yes, let's see what will happen tomorrow as well in light of this finance bill that is very contentious. My name is Debarl, living in this.